Hey everyone, guess what? We're here with Brooks. Brooks is from Crypt Sermon. I almost said the Stygian Rose. Um, they have a EP coming out on August 8th called Saturnian Appendices. Four songs, which is an expansion from their 24 album called the Stygian Rose. Brooks, again, thank you. Dude, I greatly appreciate your time.
Let me knock a
Correct.
few pronunciation things out of the way in
Oh
case we're,
yeah.
we're not live, are we?
No.
Okay, so if you wanted to re-record this, the words are Saturnian appendices, so appendices like appendix,
Okay.
and then the word Stygian, Stygian. As far as I
Why did I
know,
think it was Stygian?
the correct pronunciation is Stygian, meaning related to the river Styx.
Nope, we're gonna let that fucking roll. I'll just be a dumbass.
Cool.
Well, so what was I don't know the concept behind the whole thing. I know there is a concept behind like both albums.
Yeah, they're interrelated, and Saturnian Appendices is some of the extra tracks that we had for the Stygian Rose that we had written, and kind of as we were bringing the album together, kind of trying to decide, what are the best tracks, because we always write more than
Yeah,
belongs on an album. But the thing was, everything was fairly conceptual on this album. I'm reticent to call it a concept album, and I'll get to why that is in just a minute. So let me backtrack to catch you up to how we got to the Stygian Rose, if that's good for you.
absolutely.
Um, so, as with every lyric writer or person who kind of is the foundational concept person in a band, a lot of bands have, the person who writes their lyrics kind of is responsible for the themes that the band undertakes. Like, I wrote a lot from experience, and so on the first album, like, you're always kind of in some to some degree following along in an autobiographical way with me, but as you would be with anyone who's writing the lyrics to any album. So with Out of the Garden, we were writing a lot about, stuff that's related to biblical history, or sort of early medieval, or maybe um, like late antiquity, early medieval period, and the sort of concepts of Christianity that I was kind of wrestling with myself. And that's sort of like spoken about in the interviews. And I've been, really open about how our lyrics are informed by my background in understanding Christianity on a sort of, though I'm not a scholar myself, sort of like, let's say, a lay scholar level, because I occupy a lot of my time with reading about, um, the history of Christianity, the history of Western esotericism, and just generally speaking, religion. These are like the things that fuel my art. The things that are embedded in my paintings, and in my lyric writing. Even when we were working on writing lyrics for our old death metal band, Trench Rot, those things are in there. So we tackled a lot of that kind of straight head on with Out of the Garden, and then by the time we had gotten to the Ruins of Fading Light being the second album, I really was focusing more on Christian magic and the sort of early bubblings of what we now call Western esotericism, which include things like ritual necromancy, and a little bit of Kabbalah, a little bit of Enochian magic. And those just, in addition to being those things that were things that I was interested in, those made an excellent sort of palette from which I could use with my paintbrush to paint lyrics that were actually informed by my personal life. And all lyrics are, by every songwriter, somehow informed by their personal life. So then that brought us around to the third album, and we were kind of coming up with concepts for that. I really was kind of getting tired of being really stuck in things that were reality, and stuck in things that were very much personal and from my life, sort of autobiographical, even though I was using sort of like metaphorical language. Um, they were very much personal. So by the time I got around to the third album, oh, and another thing, the other albums were fairly rooted in Europe, and that was conceptually something I really wanted to move away from. So this, on the third album, I wanted to conceptually place us in a time and space in early America, late 1700s, early 1800s. And the thing I got really into was, as I was, just reading about the stuff that I read about, I came across a figure who was really influential and interested in expanding the concepts of spirituality, but also spiritualism. And his name was Paschal Beverly Randolph. Now, this guy was like sort of a medium, and he was sort of, in a way, you might call him a snake oil salesman. He definitely did sell sort of like cure-all stuff. He was born a free black man in the United States, so there's sort of an interesting race component to his writings as well. And then he also just wrote a ton on Rosicrucianism, which he said he got from his travels to the what I think would be called now like the Persian region. And that's like, as far as Turkey and some parts of Pakistan and India, maybe. He traveled all around that area in the army. And so one thing that I found so interesting about him is because he's not necessarily a very largely celebrated figure, is that it is supposed that he had a pretty outsized influence on the occult practice of Thelema, which is Helena Blavatsky's, practice. Um, so it is supposed that they had met here in Philadelphia at when Blavatsky was staying at the house that's on, I think it's 33rd and Sansom or something like that. It's now called the White Dog Cafe. Anyways, having all this stuff very grounded in a tangible reality was very something I was really interested in. I just read everything I could by him, and everything that he's written, generally speaking, is available for free between like the Library of Congress or the Anarchist Library in PDF form. So I would pour through all that stuff, but I didn't want to write an album through that character's eyes. It's a bit presumptive to put myself in the feet of a freed black man living in that time period. So I decided rather than like write from his perspective, I would just entirely write from the perspective of a character who, like a fictional character who was inspired by that guy. And then that gave me also the freedom to sort of mesh and meld different sort of esoteric practices and occult ideas into this new concept. Like I wanted to invent sort of a religion or whatever, or a cult, and that's the Stygian Rose, and that's sort of a blend of Rosicrucianism and what is, I think, a contemporary practice called Saturnian realism, whereby one recognizes the sort of powerful symbolic impact that the planet slash God Saturn has on our day-to-day experiences and our concepts of time and consciousness. So there's a lot of continuous themes that have been carried through from the first album to the current. I like to tie a lot of lyrics back to early stuff because they are all very personal. But in essence, this was my first opportunity to write a fictional stab at, and also kind of create a bit of a narrative that wasn't really embedded in my personal experiences of what's going on. Like this guy he's like pursuing like a sort of long lost love who is like sort of either captured or taken down to Hades or dead, or who knows. She's not there, or we don't even know that this she is even a real person. It's this sort of divine feminine Sophia, Persephone, Shakti character that he's after. He's longing and he's, this. So it gave me this ability to write from this sort of like love and lustful angle embedded in the lyrics in a way that I really didn't have personal access to in the last few albums. So it gave me a lot more of a broad palette lyrically. And so we had a lot of cool lyrics to work with and a lot of cool vibes to work with. Now, what we ended up doing between the two albums, between the Stygian Rose and Saturnian Appendices, is we kind of like put all the songs where this character is going through his magical practices, his like he's discovering like that he's after this long lost love as he's performing and investing in new magical practices. Because one of the things that when you do engage with occultism is you're learning as much about yourself as you are anything else. And really, the practice of occultism is somewhat of an art form. And I think the best practices of religion are sort of an art form rather than a dogma. Um, so, art's kind of like art's kind of like it's like the reversal of epistemology. Epistemology is you take everything into a filter, everything that all these things about a cow, right? It's got fur, it's got hooves, and it's, makes milk, and filter that down into this cup, right? And then you've got this cup, and that's your cow, right? Symbolically in your mind. What art does is incredibly, it reverses epistemology and dumps that out. So you have your concept of a cow exploded out into what everything else related to a cow could be. And that's, I think, what the best practices for both religion and occultism are. So I was able, like, when making an album like this, you get to really just engage in that practice. Now, the second follow-up, the Saturnian Appendices, are actually a lot more like a personal reflection of what this character is going through. The lyrics are embedded in like his emotions and his mental state that led him to these magical practices that culminate at the end of the Stygian Rose with the song The Stygian Rose, whereby he kind of is existentially uncovering what he's after, existentially uncovering the thing that he's been following this whole time. But it's also like literally in the form of the song, he's discovering this cult of the Stygian Rose, this cult that suggests that consciousness proceeds beyond the point of death, and that death is sort of the culmination of living. All of Crypt Sermon's lyrics presume, and I'm not certain that I share this point of view, that there is a state of consciousness beyond life, or a state of consciousness. Whether or not we experience that state of consciousness is a different thing. We might be meat objects for which consciousness sits in for a few minutes. But
it's funny you say that because I think so many people look at it so many different ways, and obviously none of us really know like what is that end thing? Like for these, for the
yeah,
meat with which we fucking are right now, it all dies,
yeah,
but is there an energy? Are we a spirit? Are we nothing? Are
yeah.
we just cells that are gonna like,
I
you
think the thing I kind of like as I was conceptualizing the album, I went through was that I have had a few, like, if you ask me point blank if I believe in ghosts, the answer is no. But with a very large caveat that I have experienced some incredibly unknowable things in my life. Um, I'm open I'm open to like trying to peek at the fringes. The Greeks used to believe, well, the ancient Greeks, not contemporary Greeks, ancient Greeks and ancient civilizations used to believe in what they called the pandemonium. You know that word, right? That means the demon haunted world. That the things that rule our world outside our view of perception. They didn't know how weather patterns worked or why crops would fail. These things were blamed on demons. This was extrapolated out later on by John Dee. Like, even though they had a better understanding of the quote unquote science at that time, that was like about 1500s. Like, even though that they were on the cusp of discovering science, John Dee was supposing, everything has an angel and a demon, its higher form of function and its lowest form of function. So even a blade of grass has an angel and a demon above it. I think these are best kept to be symbolic ideas, but I think that they're not entirely unuseful ideas.
Well, not entirely true, right? Because there are that's exactly it. I mean, it's the same thing with us as people, right? Like everything, we have our highest and best use
That's right.
and our, for lack of a better term, our piece of shit use. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah,
Like,
and of course, like in thelema, um, that would be sort of like the will. The will is your highest form of function. So I guess suppose that at a very raw level, if you're a skateboarder, when you're in your flow state, you're executing or executing your will. When you are just crushing it, when you are in that state where you are achieving those skateboarding patterns that you are, have practiced so long. And the practice of that skateboarding is your magical practice. And I think everything can be sort of brought, like, of course, every occult practice has its own, like, its own separate set of rituals that one can follow. But rituals themselves, I feel like are the thing that's important, not what you're doing in the ritual.
yeah,
um
well, like you're absolutely right. If we look at like autistic people, right? Like they have rituals. Like I say, I say autistic, but like essentially we all have rituals.
mhm.
I wake up in the morning, I make my bed before I do anything else. That is like I have to do that or the rest of my day is shot. You know,
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
fucking weird, but it's a ritual, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
But anything that you commit a ritual to, that is the ritual is an effort to improve or solidify or make better the practice. That in my view is a form of magical practice, especially if that magical practice is involving inverting or subverting or even just changing somewhat our perception of reality. And I think that can happen when you're like, I've gotten really into diving this summer and I've just been practicing diving a lot. And I think like just that practice, that state you get in where I can do this all day. I'm
yeah.
committed to this, but that happens. You can invest that same, it sounds silly when you put it into a sports metaphor, but there's very little that's different about doing that as opposed to reading esoteric text. You know?
Yeah, I don't think that's like to me it's not silly at all because if we look at like even the highest level performers, what do? They're ritualistic with how they practice, how often it is, and not even like I say ritualistic, but they're obsessive, so like when you're trying to learn something, you're like, I need to learn, go, go, go. And that's the life.
It's when it consumes you,
Yeah.
and I think that like when you get into something like that, it becomes your sort of, you know, you kind of become an elevated person. I think a lot of people, when they do find this thing that elevates, just their internal self, that you really do see it a lot. I mean, of course, there's some pretty terrible people who are experts at certain things, but the most humble of us, would be able to take that consistent practice and that ritual practice and commitment, and let it both shape, humble you because you know the challenges in front of you, and also allow it to like be a source of growth. Um, there's an old phrase, I can't quite recall who said it, but it was to improve is to change, to perfect is to change often. that there isn't a finished state for anything.
Right.
And so I think if viewing the world in that way, that nothing's ever actually all the way done. It's just about tailoring it around the edges constantly
But
and
yeah, I mean, our
seeking to
tastes
refine.
change,
Right.
like, so in my day job, I'm a realtor, and
Mhm.
they're like, I'll build you talk to someone and they're like, I'll build the perfect house. And I'm like, it's going to be perfect for you right now. By the time it's done, you're going to be like, man, I wish we would have done X, Y, and Z. Like, really? Yeah, it's going to change
Yeah.
because your needs are going to change, or your tastes are going to change, or there's going to be a new shiny thing. You're like, oh, that's cool. Like, we should do that. Like, that's funny.
I
So
mean,
let
the
me ask
walls
you
in this room
this.
have been painted a ton of times, so
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
like that.
for sure. So where did your curiosity for all of this really like come from?
Well, I was Christian for a very long time, and I was raised in evangelical church. And I think that's not uncommon for people born in the Southeast. But I went to Christian school and all that. And really, those sort of things that nag at you when you're raised in that environment, I wasn't ready to let those go. So, even after I graduated high school, I just kind of committed to it, and not necessarily the faith, but the facts.
Right.
And I became interested in learning more about the history of Christianity, learning about the sort of apocryphal texts, the Gnostic Gospels, and stuff like that, and learning about the diversity of Christianity itself. I like, I don't even really know where I stand on a lot of what makes a person a Christian or not. I think if people did follow the things that Jesus said, that would be a lot better than not. Most Christians I've observed do not do that. Um, but on the other hand, I think Christianity is responsible. I mean, it's responsible for a lot of the things that we can trace back to being sort of the ills of the world, like for all the things that people want to blame or a credit to Christian in Western achievement, most of them I think seem to be more like achieved while swimming in the waters of Christianity rather than the other way around. It was the power of the church that I think is the big problem with Christianity rather than the teachings of Jesus. So after, oh, and yeah, like I also like don't really ascribe to like sort of the supernatural beliefs that are fundamentally underlying the Judeo-Christian thing. I'm not entirely sure what I believe with regard to those, but I certainly don't think that those really jive with reality as I can observe it. Um, anyways, that being said, that that led me into studying not only the history of Christianity but broadly Western esotericism, a little bit of Eastern mysticism, like the Tao Te Ching, stuff like that. Pretty well researched into Buddhism, but I have always been very attracted to magical practices and ritual and symbolism because I think those things are inherently more artistic than dogmatic phrases.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot more leaning towards like paganism, right? Like,
I suppose so. Yeah. Um,
that's I'm not I'm not well studied in any religion because I have a hard time subscribing to someone else telling me how my life has to be. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah.
Like I tried to when I was a kid, my parents were like, go to Sunday school, do this thing. And that was cool because we'd go there and we get candy and they'd do their thing and then we'd go home. The older I got, kind of what you were saying is like I would, oh, something's missing. I'm gonna go to this church and see what's going on. And I'd get there and it was like, live like this, you've got to do this, but we're gonna fucking stab you in the back. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
can we just be like good people and understand that you're human, I'm human. Like there are times where we need a little grace, and there are times where we offer the grace to others. Like,
And I feel like you've spoken more about like what Jesus's message actually was than what I tend to hear from actual Christians, you know.
well, right, like, and that I think, like you're saying Jesus, and I think that can in what I know about other religions, those religions say the same thing.
You would hear the same thing in Buddhism. You would hear a little bit of that echo. You know that the thing that is the golden rule
Yeah.
is, which is in a lot, even in religions that preceded Christianity, or even just sort of philosophical practice that preceded Christianity. You know, the phrasing of it was, don't do to someone what you don't want done to you. And that was sort of basically a basis for behavior, even in the pagan world that preceded the dominant Christian, hegemony. But we took, we, Western society, took Jesus's phrase, do unto others as you would have them do to you. And it's a phrasing, a rephrasing that means the same thing, but there's an action element to that. See, one thing that Christianity did that wasn't really conceptually done by other religions, to my knowledge, is that in addition to evangelism, which is sort of unique, as far as I know, unique to Christianity. Another element of Christianity was service to others. Now, like in the ancient world preceding Christianity, it was up to the rich people because like religion and government, they were intertwined, like each town center had a pagan god that was sort of the patriarch or representative of that place. So that's why you get Athens, Athena, you know. So these places have, you go to say you go to Athens, you go to the Temple of Athena and you participate in temple worship because it's important to please Athena when you're in that place. But you could also, like, there are temples everywhere, tiny little ones, like little box-sized houses, where you would go worship your patron god. And this is still practiced in India, as a matter of fact. This is called temple worship. But the thing is we associate or assume that moral behavior comes from religion, or I think Christians would like us to believe that moral behavior comes from religion, when in fact, moral behavior was embedded in philosophy before it was embedded in religion.
Yeah.
Because there was a time where politics and religion were not separate, because there was a time where they didn't understand scientifically that, a lack of rain made plants wilt. I'm sort of like exaggerating what they didn't know, but like
But
they
it's
didn't
the
understand
it's the
scientifically
reality.
these things.
There were a lot of unknowns then, just like, now, like, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of shit out there where I'm sure when it comes out or we learn, it's going to go, "Oh my God, I had no idea."
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And so we've traveled that path kind of, because you and I kind of grew up in this world probably where there were these live debates about like, where do you get your morals from if not for Christianity? Not sort of acknowledging like, yo, morals like prior to 2000 years ago were embedded in society, and there's like, morals or ethics are a cultural and psychological practice, and not related to some boss telling you what to do.
Right.
And I find it kind of bothersome because I do have a bit of an anti-authoritarian streak in me, that people feel the need to derive good and bad from a boss.
Yeah.
It there's something fundamentally distasteful about that.
Oh, well, agreed.
What if that
It's the
boss is
moral
wrong?
compass. Needing someone to tell you where the moral compass is pointing is
Yeah.
like, no, I think that's where all the confusion really comes in, because if we let's look at children.
Mm-hmm.
They are honest, and they want everyone to love everyone, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and you hit a certain age, and I feel like it's about school age where you're really starting to be taught, where it's like, oh, I need this person to tell me what right and wrong is. Like, do you?
Yeah. Well, so as both a parent and an educator of young children, that's actually like my specific wheelhouse of knowledge is that we as adults have a responsibility to embed the best outcomes in our children's minds, right? Like we have, so when when you are like children don't necessarily at a young age have an inclination. I mean, there's a little bit of studies about this, and I actually kind of would go into it more, but then we'd be starting to talk about education rather than something else. But there's an instinct for fairness with young children, and there's an instinct for self-preservation in young children, and it's adults who sort of tell children where to apply that sense of fairness and where to apply that sense of survive or die. And those things manifest in the forms, societally, they manifest in the forms of generosity and bigotry. And that's where we adults, like if you put a bunch of different kids of a bunch of different backgrounds into a room, they're gonna figure it out. There's gonna be scuffles, but they're gonna figure it out. And that's I do admire children for that because in a way they're smarter than we adults are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
um
they're not, there's no like preconceived notions going in, right? They haven't been like molded like this is how it is yet. And that's,
yeah.
that
I will acknowledge that study shows that there are inherent biases. White children do show innate inherent biases, and one of our jobs as adults is to then sculpt that and be like, no, actually, when someone is different than you, this is the time for generosity. You know,
so it's
um,
the time for curiosity,
and
I
yes,
think that's where like one of my favorite phrases is, come from curiosity. If we always come from, like that is essentially it, right? And if
yeah,
we can just be curious instead of judgmental, like
yes.
the world would be in such a different fucking place,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. 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 I don't have any answers to these, right? But it's observable, right? And maybe when you can embed that stuff into music too,
Yeah.
it does help people. Like, it's been incredible to get some feedback from people who do kind of pick up some of the deeper things that are written in the lyrics and stuff like that. So when that does resonate and when you're like, oh, someone picked this up, and I had a fan, write us a letter about how his as simple as like his dog died and this song got him through. And I was like, our band can get you through the death of your dog. But like, there is, even though the music's heavy and hard, there's tenderness, and having, being able to embed a lot of different emotions into music is something I think that we're pursuing as Crypt Sermon. A lot of bands are just heavy and hard all the time. I think what we want to do is, and I think this is because of the type of people we all as the band we are, is that we want to imbue a lot of emotion and intelligence and meaning into the music while not necessarily having. I don't know. I'm not going to say that this is. I can't predict what album number 4 is,
Right.
but like we're not necessarily interested in making contemporary commentary on the state of the world. Again, I'm not certain about that.
Sure.
I can't say that we won't do that later on, but right now that's not where we are.
Right.
But we do want to, have a lot of, we want to paint with a wide sonic and lyrical palette.
So let me ask you this. Like one of the things I noticed, you guys, I'll preface this with saying that this was my introduction, like the Saturnian Appendices was my introduction to
Oh
you.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is fucking cool. Everything is like, every song is epic. Like it fucking builds and you
Yeah.
have these waves and it's super, super cool. And you guys like really mix, I think, a lot of really cool elements, within the fucking songs. So like, is it a conscious effort with every song for it to feel like this just so epic for the listener?
Yeah, I think now it is. I think as we've grown as a band, we've gotten a lot more conscious of our songwriting. So on the first two albums, it tended to be kind of one person writing a full song and bringing it to the table and tweaking around the edges, usually having me as like sort of the editor to like get the lyrics to work, or like I need to do this so that this is spicy. So there's a little bit of collaboration, but on the Stygian Rose and Saturnian Appendices, we worked almost entirely collaboratively. I think we had only two full songs finished, but every other song was written in collaboration. And one of the reasons was that we had a lot of ideas amongst ourselves, but not full ideas. And then the other reason was we definitely knew that we wanted each song to have a lot more texture, like a lot of, I don't know if you play an instrument, but
Yeah.
when you're playing like, so like when you're playing metal, right, and every song, so then the next riff comes and it's also just and it's still on that E, and you're just playing E riffs the whole time. Every riff is based in the same place. You get a little bit of variation, but when you move those feels around, you go from like a minor to the major, but you don't want to keep in that major because it's too happy, so you got to go back to a diminished feel. Moving those feelings all around and playing with the lyrics and playing with how the vocals are executed over those changing feels, and making sure you're making a conscious effort to get a bunch of different feels and tempos into a song. That was very much on purpose. And additionally, like I think because there's six of us in the band, and of course we're all super huge metalheads, but we're not just metalheads, we're just music lovers,
Right.
and wanting to be able to incorporate elements from music that aren't restricted to metal, or incorporate moods that aren't restricted to metal into the music. That was a priority for us. So, well, on Saturnian Appendices, you know, there's the first two songs which are directly related to um, the Stygian Rose. Then there's a song called Lacrimose, which was written for the Decibel Flexi series, and that song was sort of like written with this like, how far can we push key change movements in one song and keep this heavy feel? One thing you notice about a lot of other bands that play what's called epic doom metal is it's just kind of like three riffs to a song, and
It's like old punk rock, dude. Just slowed
yeah,
down. Yeah.
yeah, and they're usually kind of in the same key too. So like you got an E riff followed by another riff in E, and then maybe you get a riff that moves up to F sharp to get it a little bit extra dark. But like, you know, we wanted to write so you can hear it on Fool to Believe. You can hear it, which is related to Stygian Rose, but you can hear it on Lacrimose as well. Is that just this movement of like key changes and feel changes so that the song remains really fresh. And I think, it's possible that people are like, well, that's not doom or whatever. And at that point, we're just like, okay, like,
Like,
you know,
but then we're just arguing, like,
yeah,
people are like, it's got to be like this.
right.
Well, like, let's fucking. The thing I like about metalheads now is we are more open to other styles of music than we ever have been.
Yeah, I
You know,
totally
for
agree.
for so long it was like if you listen to thrash, you just listen to thrash,
Right.
maybe a little bit of death metal,
I
but
used
that
to
was
be one of those types of guys, right?
yeah,
Like all death metal, right? So,
yeah. I mean, I go through
yeah,
phases. I fucking love death metal,
right, right.
like
Yeah,
this
it's
is
easily one of my favorite styles of music, but like it's not the only thing I listen to.
for sure. Yeah, me neither. I'm like all over the board. I actually, funny story. I went to Bourbon and Beyond with my wife last year. Well, before my wife got there, I'm hanging out with a couple of her friends, and we go and watch this band, and I was like, "Holy shit, they're good." Her friend looks at me and she's like, "You like this?" Yeah, like they are fucking good. She's like, "But it's not metal." I'm like, "Oh." But like she texted my wife, like, "Oh my God, he actually likes something that's not metal." My wife's like, "Oh, you have no idea the things that he likes."
Yeah,
Like it's
right.
all over the fucking
Yeah.
place. But
Uh,
it good music is good music.
Yeah, and you even see it like I'd say my partner, she's a little bit more into contemporary music than I am, or contemporary aggressive music than I am. And I'll hear about a band. There's a band that we just heard the other day, and I'm not certain that I like them, but I'm really impressed with how they've executed what they do. They're called From Joy.
Mm,
Um, I don't know. There may be like a metalcore or pop. I'm not entirely sure, but there's sort of this genreless type thing. They have like metalcore, genty breakdowns, and also like very clean, polished pop vocals, and a lot of electronic elements. And I don't know, like it's not necessarily a thing I'm going to listen to a lot, but I can appreciate that these are. I presume that these are people who are younger than me, and that people who are younger than me making heavy hard music are so willing to draw from further outside and draw in different influences. One thing we're really lucky with being able to make music at home is the ability to kind of blend genre or just dissect genre
yeah.
and create new stuff. And if you look at like the top heavy metal charts or whatever, like you'll look at it and you'll be like, well, this bullshit ain't metal. Like a lot, like most of the
Yeah,
metal
but I think,
charts, like
I don't think most of us like pay attention to that shit.
right.
Like, oh, this is like the charts is where it's at. Like
Yeah.
if you asked me what the number one song played on the radio and heavy radio is, I have no fucking idea. I don't pay attention to it. You know
It's
what I
not
mean?
metallic, it's like Deftones or something. Like Deftones are absolutely the biggest heavy band in the world. They've got to be.
No, they aren't. Absolutely
Oh,
not. Metallica is the biggest
uh,
heavy band in the world.
But
And
there,
then
there, there
I,
is where I think where the discrepancy lies is calling it. I think this is I'm basing this off of a thing that I recently saw. Is like the number one heavy like music song in the world was a Deftones song, and like the top play or something like
oh,
that.
was that the new single they just put out?
No, I don't know. I don't know. It was something I was reading. And I think that's kind of what led me into saying the thing that I said. But it was
Okay.
like that list that was like had
Oh yeah.
basically the Deftones at the top over like there was like Deftones and then like maybe Metallica and then like Sleep Token or something like and these like things where it's like those things aren't metal but it was like they're enough they have the metal genre tag on them somewhere
Yeah.
and that's good enough for people to be like I like heavy music.
Well, yeah,
The
and I
term
think,
is
then it
fairly
comes to
diluted.
opinion too, right?
Was that?
Like it comes to opinion too,
Yes, that's right.
where you're like, oh, this is, like I talk to people all the time. They're like, dude, I love super heavy metal. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, who are you into? Because for me, that's my
Right.
connection with people
Yep.
is music, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, so what are you into? And they're like, Avenged Sevenfold. And
Right. Yes,
I'm
I
like,
mean it's
if that's
exactly
what
that.
you're into, cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess like I've got a buddy who's uh dating someone. We're in the metal music scene. I think you and I would probably speak the same language about the types of bands that we call metal. But this person is into stuff like deathcore and stuff like that, and it's just a completely those bands in the metalcore and deathcore and even gent world are massive. They're incredibly popular, more popular than a lot of the bands that you and I would describe as metal, right?
Well,
And like,
and I agree, right? But like if we get into like especially the like super aggressive like metalcore and deathcore, um Dude, those fucking shows are wild.
Yeah, I'm a big hardcore fan, like hardcore punk.
Yeah.
So like those shows are crazy, and it's weird because I came
Those,
from the hardcore scene, and I kind of watched, even though I'm a metal dude, right? But like I was hardcore punk was like the scene that I came from, no doubt. Um, and like I watched like I watched metalcore on its ascent, like Harvest and Overcast, then getting into like when metalcore started to get melodic, Prayer for Cleansing, Undying, and
yeah,
then Shadows Fall kind of came after Overcast, kind of taking that like thing, early 2000s. I watched this all kind of ascend, and then pop punk vocals start getting in there, and then now it's a codified genre with haircuts and stuff, and like 2006 comes and dudes are wearing eyeliner in the metalcore bands and on MTV, and you're like, wait, and
I'm confused. Yeah.
yeah, what
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah. It's,
And at
and
that
it's,
point my hair is long, right?
it,
So like,
yeah, they're like, you don't fit. You have long hair. And you're like,
right,
hold the fuck on. What's going,
right,
I don't know,
yeah.
you know?
And yeah, so like heavy music's heavy music. It's been cool because like when you participate in the scenes that we do, like death metal, thrash metal, what is sort of like the stuff sort of born out of primordial heavy metal, and that kind of has what I think we would I don't even mind saying has a sort of sense of legitimacy to it, that it's not derived from an element of like I think its background is less derived from punk and pop punk and hardcore and is more derived from the heavy metal scene, as I think like standard death metal, old school death metal, thrash metal, those tend to be. You don't get a lot of eyeliner wearing thrash bands, is what I mean to say.
Right.
Um,
Well, and it's funny because yes, I think the music has different like where it comes from, but the theory behind it is a very punk theory,
right.
and that's something I think that's really what I am drawn to is like, what are they going to try and do it DIY and,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
are they really trying to shoot for, I need a label, I need this, I need that, like,
Right.
because in a time, growing up, like, watching those fucking 80s like thrash bands. What did they do? They didn't have these big labels with all this money behind them. They got in a van, they went and played, they
That's
built their
right.
audience, which was the same with the punk bands and the hardcore bands
That's
through
right.
the 80s and 90s. It was, we're gonna go play a show. We actually, it's it's funny. Uh that they'd get to a club and the club would be like, nope, right? Show's canceled for whatever reason,
Yeah.
it's going to be too wild or whatever. And they would go play at someone's fucking house or
That's
they'd,
right. I've
they'd
been in
find
that
a place.
circumstance,
Yeah.
like,
We literally just had it the other night. Like
yeah.
are you familiar with Today is the Day?
Yeah, of course.
So they were coming through here. My buddy was throwing the show. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the show early and just kind of help out where I can. And we get there and the fucking power at the venue goes out.
Yeah.
Storm. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh
Yeah.
shit. We spent 2 hours on the phone looking for another place to have it. We end up going to this place that has a PA system. I'm not even going to name them, but they
Yeah.
have a PA system. There's no mic stands. There's no fucking XLR cables. Like they hand me the fucking iPad. Here you go. And I'm like, I can't do anything with this. What?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What the fuck? But
Right.
um that's what I mean with that like punk mentality is like, we're gonna make it happen whatever it is, and that is something that I would think that you're kind of drawn to as well, to see a band like persevere through whatever circumstance to make the show happen, to get the song out or the album out, and that's
Yeah. I definitely think that there is for sure, like, even in the sort of underground metal scene that we're somewhat part of, like those bands, I can't even think of anyone in definitely not in Crypt Sermon, but like anyone in our Philly scene who doesn't have some cross contamination with the punk scene,
right.
right? Like that's just how it goes, especially in cities like Philadelphia.
Well, I think
And
just across the around the world right now,
right, like,
like there was, although we all kind of have the same mentality of we're gonna make it happen regardless.
yeah,
Uh, back in the 80s, you didn't have a lot of crossover.
no,
90s, same thing. Like if you were a metal kid, you were a metal kid. You didn't fuck with the punk kids at all, and vice versa. And
right,
now it's the thing that I really, really enjoy is go to a metal show and you see some punk kids.
right,
Go to a punk show and you see some metal kids, and it's like this is how it should be,
yeah,
because good music is good music.
right. I think, yeah, there's also something, I think there is an underlying ethic to the underground and aggressive music scenes that draw fans in, a sort of, there's a camaraderie in being able to make it through abrasive music, and this sort of ability, like there, every scene's got its own like sort of concept of posers and stuff like that, but that's, gatekeeping happens for a reason. And if the most appropriate gatekeeps happen when you can set like the standards for operation and then open the gate to those who are genuinely willing to meet that level of standard of operation. And I think like for punk shows, that tends to be like the sort of like no bigotry, no homophobia type deal. That's not necessarily the same in the metal scene, but there is
I
an
don't know,
element.
man. I think
No,
it's
there
like
is an element of that that
I
sort of,
don't even think it's an element, like not in the, at least here,
yeah,
right? So I'm in Louisville and
right,
it's that shit's not tolerated.
right. I
You
think
go
in Philly, it's a very inclusive scene, by and large. However, I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I can safely say that the growing up in that scene, the metal scene, which wasn't much of a thing, so to speak, was fairly open to bigotry. And I can like think of
very different times though,
right,
also,
yeah, yeah.
right?
This was the
Like
late
because
'90s.
well, yeah, I mean in the 80s and 90s going to those shows, I think I am not afraid to say my introduction into heavy metal was from a racist dude.
Right.
He was absolutely like 100% racist, and I was like, that's so weird. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why are you
Yeah.
like that? Right?
Yeah.
But that, I think it was commonplace then, and here we are 40 years later. We've grown leaps and bounds in that. And like I love walking into a club now and seeing like no racism, no homophobia, like
Yeah.
everyone's fucking welcome. Yeah, we fucking should be.
Now, these are also places that invite aggressive behavior to a certain degree. And I appreciate that because I do actually think that, and especially, having come from the hardcore punk scene, knowing that young people need a place to unleash displaced anger, putting, again, gatekeeping appropriately what types of aggressive behaviors are going to be tolerated in these spaces in order to allow these spaces to continue to exist is an absolutely necessary standard.
Yeah.
Um, each individual DIY place is going to make their own level of sort of acceptable
Tolerance. Yeah.
tolerance. But I think, I've been in the place where I played sober and drug free and venues like that, and I've been in places where it's sort of like just a scumbag hellhole,
Yeah.
and you know which one's going to have, like, almost always the scumbag hellhole's still gonna have more violent incidents, even though those straight edge kids, they can be rough and rowdy. um
I don't know. Like at least, again, here locally, I think it's totally opposite, right?
yeah,
Like you go to the little, the fucking dive bars that are essentially fucking we're a bunch of scumbags that hang out there,
yeah.
whatever. Um, it's not violent.
I suppose I should say that my scumbag hellhole is definitely more open to uh drug use and open violence and open allowance of bigotry and misogyny and homophobia
That
and
is
things like
okay.
that. Like,
That's a fair statement. Like,
yeah,
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 that's a place that
yeah.
I'm not interested
Those
in being.
places do exist. I'm not going to go there.
Yeah,
You know,
same. Like,
yeah,
I don't. There, I'm fucking 50 years old.
right,
I don't, I don't care about doing drugs. I don't care if you do
right,
drugs. I'm just not interested in doing it.
right.
I'm
Yeah,
not a drinker either. I have not had a drink in a couple of years. My
yeah,
kids are now 18 and 21,
right,
and they're going to shows with me. Like, no, I want them to go to a show. I want them to know like this is a comfortable environment.
right.
Everyone knows everyone. If something happens, we're all we're all in the same fucking mindset, like, oh, this asshole, we're gonna get rid of this asshole and move on to the good shit, you know?
Yeah, historically, I have always felt that the aggressive music spaces have been necessarily safe spaces for marginalized people, and it keeps improving in that way. You
Yeah.
know, now there are, of course, aggressive music spaces that are explicitly against marginalized people, and that sucks. But that's why we don't attend those spaces.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reason we don't go there.
yeah, right, yeah.
So let me ask you this. This is kind of off topic, kind of back on your band.
Mhm.
Um, with the release August 8th, are you all doing physical copies?
So we've got LPs coming out, I think CDs, and then all the associated merch. So yeah, I mean, like the EP itself is 24 minutes or longer. I can't remember. It's getting near to a full length. Like each song's over 6 minutes. So
Yeah, no.
so it's like,
That's
it,
also a really cool thing at like in the more underground bands is they're not like we got to have the 2 or 3 minute like radio ready
yeah.
song, like, and it gives you the ability for it to be, you have the builds and the crashes and
Yeah, our band does nothing without the roller coaster ride of each song. The point of listening is not to hear the hook.
right, right.
You're gonna get the hook, and we want those hooks to get in there. And I think we make conscious effort to write some good hooks, but it's a lot of sort of like build and payoff. And when you'll notice like songs almost never have a second or a third chorus.
Right.
Most songs tend to have just like, oh, you're lucky if we came back to it.
Yeah.
So, um, you know,
I know, but in my mind, like that kind of songwriting, it keeps it moving forward. And
yeah,
there's like if I want to listen to this part of the song, I can always go back and listen to that part of the song. But I want to hear, I want to hear. uh, honestly, I'm a whole album guy.
right,
If I listen to an artist, I put the fucking I'm like, oh, this is the album I want to listen to. I put it on from start to finish
right,
because to me it's that full piece of art,
right.
and the vinyl, it's a it's fucking big and tangible. Oh,
I'm very much in that same vein where, like, I made some concessions on the last album. The Ruins of Fading Light was 55 minutes long, and it actually had three sort of bumper tracks on it. And the reason I did that was, well, not me, we made a decision at the time, with which got some not quite as positive feedback, which is maybe the only real consistent negative feedback, but three bumper tracks, two bumper tracks in a row. But if you're having the album experience, which I enjoy sitting down with a record, opening up everything, looking through it, and, put on the record, flip the record, one side wraps up, there's an outro bumper track, you put on the next record, a whole other LP starts with a bumper track, and you get this just immersive experience. Now, and you're sitting there listening to it on like Spotify or whatever, and you're not sitting with your art in front of you, and you're not investing 55 minutes into listening to music. You want those like you maybe just want all rock and no stop. But
Yeah, again, even like even when I get in my car, I'm like, put this artist, this album, and then when that's over, I'm like, okay, am I gonna let it just kind of keep going, or am I gonna go find another artist or another album, or what happens? It's
yeah.
maybe that's I think people call that autism now.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
because I'm just obsessive like that. Like, oh, we're not just gonna listen to fucking six different songs from six bands. Like, no, no, we're gonna listen to this fucking album because I want to hear the whole thing.
And how, like an album, especially for heavy music, tends to be more of an investment, and each song, like, there's a lot of choices as to why songs, like, I really do actually love pop music. I'm a huge pop music fan. Um, but like in heavy metal, like the song placement on an album, as someone who's very much into pop music, song placement on a heavy metal album seems much more intentional. pop
Yeah.
pop albums have pretty consistent, like, track after track after track. I would say, like,
But I feel like they're also more focused on like the singles
very
instead of
much
the
so.
album experience, right?
Yeah, and like I would say that there's some exceptions to that rule. I would even say, like, as a huge contemporary album, Brat, Charlie XCX Brat is a great arrangement and track sequence. The album tells a story, and that album feels really intentional. And I was just as taken with it as everyone else was last summer. So, like, it's not, even stuff that is super mainstream like that, can be artistic in its own way. But I don't get that vibe from most pop albums I listen to.
Right.
They generally seem like, and like, to be honest, even a lot of them feel like they have a lot of tracks that are filler. If it's just like, these lyrics aren't as good as that last song,
Yeah,
Um,
and that's that I think that's one thing that kind of turned me away from well, I say turned me away from pop music, but I was never really a huge like pop music person.
yeah,
I've always been drawn more towards I guess the more DIY shit,
yeah,
you know. But I feel like when I tried to listen to, a pop artist's like full album, it was there was filler tracks and you could tell like they're just fucking phoning this in.
yeah,
This is boring.
yeah,
They're not into it. Like move on. And I despise putting on an album and skipping tracks.
yeah, yeah.
No.
That makes sense. Honestly, because you're into the music you're into, and, like, let's say, let's pick a recent Cannibal Corpse album, Torture, right? Every song on that happens perfectly, right?
Yep.
Like, when I can't remember what the song precedes it, but prior to Scourge of Iron, you're just blasting, right? And it's just so intense and neck snapping. And then the next track is Scourge of Iron, and Scourge of Iron has no blast beats to my knowledge. And
Right.
it's even sort of an atypical Cannibal Corpse song, because it's all just that mid tempo the whole way through, right?
Yep.
And it feels on that album like it makes that album sort of culminate. And then you come out of this song that's just like basically one long breakdown, and you're back into technical blasting, and you're back into the riffing, and you're like, oh, I both, like, banged my head so hard, but also now I'm like back into like this escalation. It's like, you
Yeah.
know
Well, and
and
that's the really cool thing about like heavy bands is they'll do something, they fucking build you up, and then they're like, hold on, we're gonna like let you kind of just get beat up for a minute, and then we're gonna fucking bring you right back, and you're like, whoa,
yeah.
hold on, what's going on? And not every band does that.
Yeah, not every band does that, but I think that's one thing about heavy music that doesn't happen in almost any other genre, unless it's like lyrically, because, like, like, country music does this lyrically a lot, so, like, their albums can be like very intentional. I'd say more like, 60s through early 80s country music really nailed this, not
I
not so much like
agree
contemporary.
with that.
Yeah.
So it's funny you bring up country music. That artist that I was absolutely blown away with at Bourbon and Beyond was a country artist.
Yeah.
It was the Red Clay Strays.
Red Clay Strays. Don't think I've heard them, but yeah, I'm a big country music fan. I'm from North Carolina, so
Oh,
grew up with country music.
they absolutely blew me away. Like the live show was amazing.
Yeah.
I was so impressed that I fucking ordered their album while I was watching them. Like as they're finishing the last song, I'm like, order that bitch. Like,
Yeah,
keep it to
yeah,
the
that's all.
house.
I love seeing a band like that. I saw a pop punk band the other week, Hell Beach from Vermont. I don't even know if they're very big. I think they're kind of a small band. They were so good live. They were just so awesome live that I was like, oh, I'm gonna get on their Bandcamp real quick
Yeah.
because they didn't have LPs with them. So,
There was one, we were in Illinois like 2 weeks ago, maybe, and this band from Orlando called The Pauses played, and
cool
they
band
had this,
name.
it's like a, I don't know, like a pop punk like thing.
Yeah,
Holy fuck, dude. They were so good. The whole
yeah.
crowd, they were the only band like that on the whole bill.
Which is always awesome when you get one band that's kind of like I love mixed genre bills like that.
Yeah.
I always love it when Crypt gets to play with like goth bands, really keep the mood dark and stuff.
Dude, it like fucking that is like the perfect mix.
That is peanut butter and jelly of dark music, right?
Yes. It really is. That's a good
Yeah,
way to put it.
yeah.
All right, Brooks. I know you've got shit to do today. I also have shit to do today. I think we've had a great conversation. I cannot thank you enough for your time, dude. It's been a blast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hell yeah, dude.
Great
We'll go and
talking to
have,
you, man.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Go and have yourself a great day.
I will.
Thanks. See ya.